Hello, and welcome to Brada Tales. Tonight, we're bringing you a selection of eerie stories paired with the soothing sound of rain to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Before diving into the atmosphere of suspense, leave a comment below letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is. If these stories send chills down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get comfortable, let the fear gradually envelop you, and tell us what kind of stories you'd like to hear next time. Settle in, we're about to begin. Mysterious Firefly. This was my first trip to the Appalachians. I'd always been drawn to mountains, their quiet vastness, the feeling of being swallowed by nature, far from the world's distractions. The idea of hiking through this old forest excited me. I needed to escape the noise, the pressure of city life, and just breathe. I had come alone. It wasn't unusual for me. I preferred solitude, the peace of being out in the wilderness, where everything seemed simpler. The air felt fresh as I stepped into the trailhead, a cool breeze sweeping through the trees. The forest was alive with the hum of nature, birds calling, leaves rustling underfoot. The path stretched ahead, winding deeper into the thick woods, and I felt that familiar thrill of adventure stirring inside me. I wasn't here to prove anything. I didn't have an agenda. The hike was a break, a chance to clear my head. Yet, even with the forest surrounding me, there was a heaviness in the air, something I couldn't place, but I didn't mind it. I shrugged it off, focusing on the path ahead. The trees grew taller and closer together, their trunks thick with age, their branches forming a dense canopy above. The sunlight dimmed as I walked deeper into the woods, and the air grew cooler. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, thick, almost oppressive. But I was here to find peace, not to dwell on uneasy feelings. I pushed forward, eager to see where the trail would lead. The further I walked, the quieter the forest became. It was as if the usual sounds, the distant calls of animals, the rustling of leaves in the wind, faded away. It felt wrong, this silence. Or perhaps it was just too still. I glanced around, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The quiet was unnerving. My breath quickened slightly, but I dismissed it. It was just the wilderness, after all. I took my first steps into the forest, feeling the soft earth beneath my boots. The trail was narrow, winding its way between the towering trees. Each step seemed to carry me deeper into a world untouched by time, a place where nature ruled with quiet authority. The light filtering through the leaves danced on the forest floor, casting intricate shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. It was beautiful, undeniably so. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. The forest felt alive, as if the very ground beneath my feet was breathing with me. I slowed my pace, letting the moment sink in. There was something peaceful about it all, something that made me feel at ease. For a moment, I was alone with my thoughts, surrounded by the green embrace of the trees. But even in this tranquil moment, I felt a subtle shift in the air. The shadows around me seemed deeper, darker than they should have been, stretching long and thin across the ground, as though they were reaching out toward me. I stopped for a moment, trying to make sense of the feeling, but the sense of unease clung to me like a shadow of its own. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. The forest had a way of distorting things, shadows, light, sound. It was a living thing, after all, and its moods could change with the wind. But as I pressed on, the air grew heavier, thicker somehow. It wasn't oppressive, but it felt dense. The crispness of the forest seemed to be replaced by something heavier, something that didn't belong. The path ahead remained open, But now, the trees felt closer, almost pressing in. Their trunks stood tall and unmoving, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to watch my every move. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling, but no matter how fast I walked, the sensation of being surrounded by something unseen persisted. Something that didn't want to be ignored. I continued down the trail, the sound of my footsteps crunching softly against the forest floor. My mind wandered as I lost myself in the rhythm of the walk, the peacefulness of the forest momentarily pushing aside the unease that had been creeping up on me. It was easy to forget about the unsettling stillness when you were surrounded by such beauty. The towering trees, the moss-covered rocks, the distant murmur of a brook somewhere far off, everything felt perfectly natural. Then, I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker of light, barely noticeable through the thick trees. I stopped in my tracks, my eyes scanning the dimming forest around me. There it was again, a tiny, bright dot of light, almost like a star, dancing between the trunks of two massive oak trees. It hovered in place for a moment, its glow faint but steady, before it blinked out and reappeared a few feet further along the trail. It was unlike any natural light I had ever seen, too small, too precise, and it didn't seem to belong in the dim forest. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. My first thought was that it was just a reflection, maybe a distant flashlight from another hiker or something reflecting off a piece of metal. But no, there was no sign of anyone else nearby, and the light was too erratic to be a reflection. I stood there for a moment, watching as the light blinked again, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. But then a chill ran down my spine, and I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of curiosity from my mind. It was probably just a firefly, I reasoned, or some strange, natural phenomenon I had never encountered before. Nothing to be concerned about. I took another step forward, telling myself not to be foolish. The light flickered one more time and then disappeared into the thick of the forest, swallowed up by the shadows. I glanced around, half expecting to see something or someone else. But there was only the quiet rustle of leaves and the ever-looming silence of the forest. I continued on, my mind still lingering on that strange light, but I forced myself to move forward. It wasn't anything to worry about, I told myself. It was just the forest playing tricks on me, that's all. Nothing to be afraid of. The further I walked into the forest, the quieter it became. At first, it had been the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, the distant call of birds, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. But now, all those familiar sounds had faded into nothingness. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the steady rhythm of my footsteps crunching against the dirt trail. It felt wrong. The silence was unnatural, almost oppressive, as if the entire forest had fallen mute, holding its breath in anticipation. I paused and stood still for a moment, straining to hear anything, but there was nothing. No chirping of crickets, no wind in the trees. Just the eerie quiet, broken only by my own presence. I looked around, half expecting to see someone, anything, but the forest stretched on endlessly, vast and empty. The trees, once towering and majestic, now seemed like silent sentinels, closing in on me. Their trunks, gnarled and twisted, felt almost like they were leaning in, watching, waiting. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the unease creeping up my spine. I wasn't sure why, but I felt isolated. More so than I had ever felt before. It was as though the forest had swallowed me whole, pulling me away from everything familiar. The sense of being alone in the woods, in the depths of nature, was more profound than I had anticipated. I shook my head, trying to shake off the feeling. It's just the quiet, I told myself. You're overthinking it. But even as I tried to reassure myself, I couldn't ignore the way the air had thickened. It wasn't just the silence, it was the stillness, the way everything seemed to have stopped moving, as if the world had paused just for me. I glanced around again, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. But the forest was as still as ever. The path ahead remained clear, but the oppressive quiet gnawed at me, growing heavier with every step I took. It was as if the deeper I went, the more I was cut off from everything. The isolation was becoming suffocating. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, a growing sense of anxiety began to twist inside me. The emptiness of the forest seemed to be closing in, and I was beginning to feel trapped. As I continued down the path, my thoughts turned inward, trying to focus on anything other than the eerie silence that enveloped me. The stillness was getting to me, and the isolation I had been feeling earlier now seemed more like a weight pressing down on my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had come here to escape the noise of life, but the absence of sound was now making me uneasy. That's when I saw it again. At first, it was just a flicker at the corner of my vision, something faint in the darkness between the trees. I almost ignored it, chalking it up to my mind playing tricks, but then it blinked once more, brighter this time, and moved a little closer. It was the same glowing light I had seen earlier, only now it was larger, more distinct, and its glow was unmistakably stronger. It hovered just beyond the reach of the trees, dancing in the air, weaving in and out of the shadows. For a moment, I just stared at it, transfixed by its gentle yet persistent flickering. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something unnerving about it, something unnatural in the way it moved. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat quickening. The feeling of unease that had been creeping up on me was now a full-fledged knot in my stomach. But I refused to let it take hold. I had to stay calm. I was alone in the wilderness, far from anyone or anything that could offer comfort. The last thing I needed was to let a strange light in the forest round me. It's just a firefly, I told myself. That's all. Just a firefly. There's no reason to be afraid. But as the light moved closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't as harmless as I wanted it to be. It wasn't behaving like anything I'd seen before. It flickered erratically, almost as though it were beckoning me to follow. The air seemed to grow heavier with each step I took toward it. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. I stopped, staring at the glowing orb. It hovered in place, the light pulsing faintly, almost like a heartbeat. I felt a sudden compulsion to move closer, as if I were being drawn toward it by some unseen force. The fear in my chest flared up again, sharper this time, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Something about it, something about the way the light seemed to pull at me, kept me rooted to the spot. For a long moment, I stood there, caught between fear and curiosity, watching the light as it inched closer. My breath came faster, and I felt my body tense. But I didn't take a step forward. I couldn't. I shook off the uneasy sensation, telling myself I was simply letting my mind get the best of me. The light, whatever it was, could have been anything, a trick of the eyes, a reflection of something in the distance. I turned my back to it, forcing my legs to move forward. I was going deeper now, the path winding further into the woods, but there was something different about the way the forest felt. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was as if the very air had changed, thickened, weighed down with a kind of tension I couldn't name. Every step I took felt heavier, as though the ground itself was reluctant to let me pass. I quickened my pace, desperate to leave behind the flickering light, but every time I looked over my shoulder, there it was, glowing faintly just beyond the trees, always just out of reach, but never truly gone. It felt wrong. I was sure I had been walking for a while now, but the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, the same trees, the same shadows, the same stillness. I paused to look around, my breath quickening. I had taken the same turn several times, hadn't I? Hadn't I already passed that group of thick oaks? No, I couldn't have. But something about the surroundings, the way everything looked, felt as if I had been walking in circles, retracing my steps without realizing it. I turned again, trying to gauge my direction, but it felt as if the forest was deliberately shifting, as though the very path beneath me was changing. I could hear my own heartbeat now, thumping loud in my ears, matching the faint pulsing of the light behind me. I kept moving, the sound of my boots crunching on the leaves and twigs breaking the otherwise complete silence. But every time I glanced over my shoulder, the light remained at the edge of my vision, always present. It didn't flicker like a firefly anymore. It burned steadily, pulling me with its glow. It can't be. I pushed the thought away. I'm imagining things. But the longer I walked, the less certain I was. I was certain that I had taken a left turn at that boulder, yet there it was again, the same cluster of trees, the same gap in the trunks, the same silhouette of the darkened path ahead. I stopped. Something wasn't right. I was losing my sense of direction, like I was caught in the grip of a labyrinth that didn't exist on any map. It was as if the forest was drawing me in, pulling me deeper, twisting the trail, leading me towards something unknown, something I couldn't see but could feel just beyond the edge of my senses. And still, the light followed. Always a few steps behind. Never flickering out. I tried to think logically. This is just the forest playing tricks on me. It's the shadows, the light playing off the trees. But even as I told myself that, the feeling of being trapped, of moving in circles, grew stronger. And the closer the light came, the more I felt as if something was waiting. Watching. I had been walking for what felt like hours. The path, though it seemed familiar, was no longer the one I had started on. The trees, those towering oaks and pines that had once appeared so distinct, now seemed like strangers. The shadows they cast looked different, darker, longer, and they stretched unnaturally, as though the forest itself was shifting, rearranging, hiding something just beyond my vision. I stopped again, my breath shallow and uneven. Something was wrong. The trees around me felt wrong. Their bark looked darker than it had before, as though they had absorbed the light and the warmth of the day and were now cloaked in something foreign. I glanced around, trying to recognize something, anything, that could confirm I was on the right path. But everything was unfamiliar. I took a step forward and looked to my left. There it was, the same tangled mess of vines and underbrush that I had passed earlier, but now it seemed more menacing, as if the path had twisted itself into a knot that I couldn't untangle. The air, which had once been crisp, now felt thick, suffocating. The silence was complete, almost oppressive. No chirping birds, no rustling leaves, only the soft sound of my footsteps and my quickened heartbeat. I tried to shake off the growing sense of panic, telling myself it was just fatigue, that I was overthinking it. Keep moving, I thought. I had to get out of here. But as I walked, I began to realize that the landscape was not matching up with the memory I had of the trail. The path should have curved ahead, yet there was nothing but more trees, a wall of them that felt impossibly dense. And when I looked back, the way I had come seemed just as strange. There was no trace of the familiar markers I had passed, no moss-covered rock, no distinct clearing where I had rested before. Everything blended together, indistinguishable from the other. My pulse quickened and my thoughts scattered. How did I get here? I had been so sure of my direction just moments ago, but now I felt lost, completely lost in a forest that seemed to stretch on endlessly, as if it had no boundaries. I turned around, scanning the trees once more, desperate for something that might anchor me, something I recognized. But there was nothing. I felt the overwhelming pressure of isolation settle in again, stronger this time. It wasn't just the silence or the way the forest seemed to bend around me, it was that I no longer knew how I had ended up here, on this strange new path. No, I thought, this isn't right. I'm not supposed to be here. I glanced up ahead and saw a flicker of light, just like before. The glow was there again, hovering in the distance, only now it seemed brighter, clearer, drawing me in with an almost magnetic pull. The light. It was always there, always just ahead. Was I chasing it? Or was it chasing me? I couldn't tell anymore. I turned back, attempting to retrace my steps, but the forest stretched before me like an endless maze, its twisted trees and shadowed corners mocking my attempts to find a way out. Nothing looked familiar anymore. I had no idea which direction was the right one. And as I stood there, caught between confusion and rising panic, I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer in control. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The light, that flickering, ethereal glow, was no longer just a distant firefly. It was something more. Something different. It pulsed now, rhythmically, like a heartbeat in the dark, growing brighter, larger, as if it had a life of its own. And with each pulse, it seemed to draw closer. I had to keep walking. I told myself that again, over and over. But my legs felt heavy, my feet unsteady, as if the earth beneath me was shifting. I couldn't make sense of it, of the path, of the trees, of the way the light seemed to follow me, no matter which direction I went. It wasn't a firefly anymore. The glow shifted and warped before my eyes, stretching and shrinking in ways that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just a light. It was as though the light was alive, as if it were aware of me. At first, it had been a soft glow, something small and almost gentle. But now, it seemed to grow. The shape wasn't constant. Sometimes it was round, like the faint glow of a lantern in the distance, and other times it flickered like the shape of a wisp of smoke. It was as though it were shifting, changing, taking on different forms the longer I watched it. And with each change, it seemed to stretch itself, like it was reaching toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was it following me? I stopped dead in my tracks, and my breath hitched in my throat. The light wasn't just flickering anymore, it was moving toward me. Slowly, as though it had all the time in the world, but with a deliberate purpose. I couldn't look away, couldn't make myself turn and run. Something in me was frozen, caught in that sickeningly sweet glow. It was too much. The fear was rising inside me, flooding my chest like ice water. I could feel the hairs on my neck standing on end, my skin prickling as a cold wave of dread washed over me. There was something wrong with it, something wrong with the way it moved, like it wasn't just a simple flicker of light. It was alive. It was aware of me. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. The light had taken on another shape now. It wasn't just a flicker, it was a figure. A silhouette, like a shadow that moved in the shape of a human form, just barely outlined by the faint glow. It was too much. I could see it now, standing before me, or at least appearing to stand, as if waiting. Waiting for what? My feet felt rooted to the ground, my mind screaming for me to run, but I couldn't. The light had become something else, something that wasn't natural, wasn't right. It felt like a presence, like something that knew me, knew where I had been, knew what I was thinking. I stumbled back, my breath shallow, heart pounding as it came closer, the glow expanding. The form, no, the shape, shifted again, and now it wasn't even humanoid. It became something larger, its edges fuzzy, stretching into the darkness of the trees. It wasn't just light anymore. It was presence. Wait. Something unseen but very, very real. The fear that had been creeping up on me broke into a full, suffocating panic. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I had to move. I had to get away. But my legs refused to cooperate. I was paralyzed by something far more terrifying than just the sight of a glowing insect in the woods. It was like the light had become a ghost, an entity, something that was slowly, inexorably pulling me toward it. I could hear my pulse in my ears now, loud and frantic. The air felt thick, as though the entire forest had drawn in a single breath, holding it tight. It was waiting, just as the light was waiting, for me to make the first move. But I didn't move. I couldn't. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light dimmed. It flickered, once, twice, before disappearing entirely. The forest seemed to exhale, as though the weight of its presence had lifted. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt empty. Something was wrong. Something had just been there, something that shouldn't have been. I stood frozen, the silence around me even more deafening now. The silence was broken. At first, it was subtle, a faint rustling in the underbrush, a light brush of leaves shifting in the breeze. It was normal, the kind of sound you'd expect in a forest, the gentle movements of nature at rest. But then it changed. The rustling grew louder, sharper, as though something was moving just out of sight. My eyes darted around, trying to locate the source, but the trees, thick and tangled, only offered shadows. I heard another noise, a soft crunch of leaves beneath something heavy. But that wasn't it. The sound changed again. It was no longer the subtle shuffle of forest life, it was something deliberate. A step. Then another. The sharp crack of twigs underfoot. Someone, something, was walking in the woods with me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The noise was too close now, far too close. The footsteps were clear, heavy, echoing off the trees as if they were walking right behind me. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Just the dark trunks of the trees stretching endlessly into the night. The sounds grew more distinct, faster, closer. Step after step, each one a heavy thud against the forest floor, echoing like the rhythm of a chase. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. No, this can't be happening. I thought, forcing myself to take a step forward. But the more I moved, the closer the footsteps seemed to get. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, every rustle, every crack of a twig, turning into the unmistakable sound of someone or something walking right behind me. I spun around again, my chest tightening, but the woods remained still, the dark trees looming silently around me. There was nothing. No one. But the sounds didn't stop. The forest had stopped making sense. The sounds weren't natural anymore. The whispering leaves, no longer gentle, had become a distorted, almost screeching noise. Every movement in the woods around me felt exaggerated, twisted, amplified. The air seemed thick with tension, and I could hear every noise, every footstep, every crack of the branches like 1,000 loud voices in my head. It's just my mind, I told myself, just the woods playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake it. There was someone moving with me. And each time I stopped, the sound would stop, only to start again the moment I took another step. I felt the weight of the presence, unseen, but undeniably real, right behind me, as if it were just waiting for me to make a mistake. A wrong turn. The steps were louder now, unmistakable, and they were no longer in sync with mine. They didn't just follow me, they seemed to be mimicking my movements, staying just one step behind. The sound of branches snapping underfoot, the crunch of leaves in the dirt, it was all perfectly timed, perfectly coordinated with my own movements. And the deeper I went into the woods, the more the sounds twisted and stretched, warping into something unnatural. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the strangeness of it all. It's just the wind, I tried to reason. It's just the forest shifting. Just the trees moving. But I couldn't convince myself. Every rustle, every snapping branch felt intentional. It wasn't just wind. It wasn't just the sound of nature. It was something else. Something that was moving with me, matching me step for step. Then, with a sudden sharp crack, the sound stopped. Just like that. As if someone had slammed the door shut on the forest itself. But I didn't feel relief. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. It felt wrong. I could still hear my heartbeat, loud and frantic in my chest, as though it were the only sound in the world. And then, faintly, impossibly, I heard a whisper. It was so soft at first that I thought it might have been my own mind, playing tricks on me. But it came again, clearer this time. A voice. But not one that belonged to anything alive. It was distant, hollow. A whisper carried by the wind, or maybe something else. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was nothing there. Only the stillness of the forest, the shadows stretching long in the darkness. But the whisper continued. And it was getting closer. I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Every direction I turned, every path I tried to retrace, led me nowhere. It was as though the forest itself was shifting, rearranging in response to my every step, its dense, unyielding walls closing in around me. The more I moved, the more the trees seemed to close together, as if the branches themselves were reaching out to block my way. This can't be real. I tried to calm myself, to think clearly. I had to get out of here. The rational part of my brain screamed that I just needed to backtrack, retrace my steps to the trailhead, but something was off, wrong. I couldn't remember how I had gotten here in the first place. I thought I knew where I was, but the landscape in front of me felt like a distorted reflection, warped and unfamiliar. The sound of my footsteps seemed to echo unnaturally, bouncing back from every direction, making it impossible to tell where I had already walked. The light, the same glowing, flickering presence, had appeared again, further off but still too close for comfort. It pulsed gently in the distance, its shape shifting with each flicker, always growing brighter, always moving closer. I'm not imagining this, I thought desperately, but the doubt lingered in the back of my mind. The light wasn't natural. It couldn't be. It was becoming something else, something more, drawing me toward it, or perhaps pulling me in. I stumbled forward, feeling the air grow heavier with each step. I pushed past the thick underbrush, the sharp branches scratching at my skin, but the light never seemed to move farther away. No matter how hard I tried, no matter which direction I went, it remained in sight. Always just on the edge of my vision, never too far, always growing closer. Is this a dream? I wondered, my pulse quickening. Am I asleep? The woods seemed to stretch infinitely before me, like a maze designed to keep me lost. The path I had walked before seemed to dissolve into nothing, leaving only the deep, endless dark. The trees, their once comforting forms, had become twisted, gnarled shapes, silent witnesses to my growing panic. The forest had transformed into something oppressive, a labyrinth with no exit, no way out. The air grew colder, and the light ahead burned even brighter, its glow sharpening into something more solid, a pale, ghostly shape that was almost alive. It wasn't just a flicker anymore. It was a presence, a figure that beckoned me, calling me toward it. Each pulse of the light seemed to reach into my chest, tightening around my heart. I have to escape. I have to get away from it. I turned again, retracing my steps, hoping beyond reason that I would stumble upon something, anything, that would lead me back. But the forest only stretched out in front of me, an endless stretch of trees, their branches weaving together in a way that made it impossible to tell which way I had come from. It wasn't real, I told myself. It's just the forest playing tricks on me. But the light kept drawing nearer, the silence around me growing deeper, suffocating. The ground felt unstable beneath my feet, as though I were walking on something more fragile than soil. Each step seemed to sink deeper into the earth, slowing me down, trapping me further. I turned again, searching for a way out, but the path had changed again. The trees ahead looked wrong. They were the same, yet different. The shapes were familiar but twisted, as though they had been reshaped by something I couldn't comprehend. The forest wasn't just disorienting anymore. It was becoming hostile. The trees seemed to lean in, crowding me, and I had the sudden, terrifying thought that they were alive, watching me. I'm trapped. I'm lost. There's no way out. I tried to steady my breath, fighting the wave of panic crashing over me. The light was still coming closer. I was still walking forward, moving toward it, but it wasn't getting any easier. It felt as though I were walking in place, unable to escape, unable to find anything that made sense. And then, the whisper came again. Soft at first, but growing louder, clearer, almost human. It was not a voice. It was a sound. A command. Something dark and inescapable. I stopped in my tracks, listening, feeling my heart stop in my chest. Don't look back. It was a warning, a presence that had come for me, that knew what I feared. And still, the light came closer, closer, until I could almost feel its cold glow on my skin. I turned once more, desperate to escape, to find something that made sense, but the forest was a mirror now, repeating itself in endless, suffocating loops. There was no escape. The light was coming, and this time, there would be nothing to stop it. The air had grown unnaturally still. I had been moving through the woods for what felt like hours, or maybe days. I couldn't tell anymore. Time had lost all meaning, distorted and warped by the constant, unnerving pull of that light. My mind was playing tricks on me. I knew it. It had to be. But then, something changed. I could feel it, a shift in the atmosphere, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The air felt heavier, colder, like a shadow was creeping up behind me. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees around me loomed larger, their twisted branches bending in unnatural angles, like they were watching, waiting. And then, I saw it. A figure, a dark shape that moved just out of the corner of my eye. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was there. For a brief moment, it was as though the shadows themselves had come to life. A form, tall, thin, but wrong in every possible way. It wasn't human. Not completely. The shape seemed to distort, stretching unnaturally, and then snapping back. It didn't make a sound. Just the slightest rustle of air, like a whisper from the darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My body screamed at me to run, to turn and flee, but I couldn't move. The figure wasn't approaching. No, it was moving with me. Keeping its distance, yet staying in my periphery, just close enough to make me question my sanity. It's just my mind, I thought desperately. Just the stress of being lost. I'm seeing things. But that wasn't it. I knew it wasn't. There was something about it. Something wrong. The way it moved, how it seemed to bend the space around it, like it didn't belong here, like it wasn't a part of the world I knew. The air grew colder as it lingered just out of sight, the forest feeling more oppressive with each passing second. I couldn't look directly at it. Every time I tried, it vanished. Just for a moment. But I could always feel it. The presence was there, hovering at the edge of my vision, stalking me in a way that made my stomach churn. It's just the light, I reasoned, trying to explain it away. The glow messing with my mind, warping everything. But then I felt it again, something even worse than before. A shift in the ground beneath my feet, a weight, a pressure as though the earth itself was pushing back. Something was watching me from the dark. It wasn't the light. No, the light was something else. Something that was pulling me in, not chasing me. But this presence, this thing that moved with me, was different. It didn't want me to come closer. It was keeping its distance, letting me feel its presence without fully showing itself. The shadow that hovered just beyond the reach of my eyes. I forced myself to take a step forward. Another. And then it happened. I heard it, a soft, low rasping sound, like the drag of something heavy against the ground. It was coming from behind me, just out of sight. I snapped my head around, but the forest was still. Empty. Quiet. Nothing. But the sound was still there, lingering in my mind, echoing in the silence. The figure had moved. It was closer now. I could feel it. It's just my imagination, I told myself again, my hands trembling. I'm just paranoid. It's the isolation. I've been out here too long. I took another step. My foot hit the ground harder than I meant, the thud reverberating through the trees, but that didn't matter. I was so focused on the sound that shouldn't exist. The soft scrape of something against the earth, like nails dragging on stone, slow and deliberate. The shape was closer now. And somehow, I could feel it watching me, waiting. I spun again, heart hammering in my chest. There was nothing. Just the trees, the deep shadows, the darkening sky above. But the air felt wrong. There was no breeze, no rustling leaves. Only the silence. And the presence. I couldn't escape it. No. I refused to let myself believe it was real. It's a trick. Just the pressure of the forest. It's got to be. But then the shape moved again. This time, it was not a flicker in the corner of my vision. No, it was right there, standing just at the edge of the trees. A tall, gaunt figure, its outline blurred and distorted, stretching like smoke curling in the wind. It didn't have a face, just the absence of one. The space between its shoulders and arms was wrong, as if its form was too thin, too stretched out. It was like looking at something half-formed, something not meant to exist in this world. I stumbled back, but my legs felt heavy, sluggish. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, frozen in place. And then, just like before, it was gone, disappearing into the dark as if it had never been there. But I knew it was real. It was out there, watching me. I wasn't crazy. Whatever it was, whatever that thing was, it was in the forest with me, and it wasn't going anywhere. My mind was beginning to fracture. I couldn't trust my thoughts anymore. The rational explanations, the reassurances I kept telling myself, they felt empty, hollow. I had always prided myself on being grounded, logical. I was the kind of person who could navigate a problem with a clear head, who could make sense of even the most chaotic situations. But now, everything felt wrong. What's happening to me? I tried to breathe, to steady myself, but my chest tightened with each inhale. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, something dense and suffocating. I had been out here for too long. I had to get out. But that presence, the shape in the trees, kept following me. It was there, always at the edge of my senses, just beyond my reach. I could feel its weight pressing down on me, its emptiness filling the spaces around me. I looked over my shoulder again, my heart racing. The forest was as still as death, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, studying me from the shadows. My pulse quickened, and I clutched at my chest, trying to calm the storm inside me. No, this isn't happening. It's just the isolation, the fatigue, the stress. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I realized how futile it all felt. This wasn't just a trick of the mind. There was something out here, something that wasn't human, something unnatural that I couldn't explain. The light was still there, faintly flickering in the distance, like a beacon pulling me toward it, but now I was afraid to get any closer. It felt wrong. That soft, unrelenting pull had shifted into something darker, something that made my skin crawl. I didn't know what it wanted, but I felt its presence gnawing at the back of my mind. I ran a shaky hand through my hair. My thoughts were getting tangled, slipping through my fingers like smoke. Am I losing it? I glanced back at the trees, but nothing. Nothing but shadows. The deep, endless dark. It's just a forest. It's just a forest, I repeated, as if the mantra would make it true. But the words felt hollow in my mouth, empty, like they couldn't reach the part of me that was screaming for escape. There was something out there, something that I couldn't explain, and it was getting closer. I heard a rustle behind me, soft and quick, and I spun around. Nothing. Only the same dark expanse of trees. But it was there. I knew it was there. I felt it pressing in on me, suffocating me. I stumbled backward, my breath shallow, and the ground beneath me seemed to shift. Was I even walking in a straight line anymore? The trees, the path, everything was beginning to blur into one indistinct mass of shadows and light. This isn't real, I thought, my mind grasping at any explanation. This is just a trick. I'm just tired, dehydrated. But something inside me knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just the isolation. It wasn't just fatigue. It was something else, something I couldn't see, something that was just out of reach. I had never been a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of the things people talked about around campfires. But now, as I stood in the middle of this ancient forest, with its twisted trees and oppressive silence, I was starting to wonder, what if this is something more? The trees shifted around me. They felt like they were moving closer, tightening in on me, pressing in. I looked for a way out, but every direction seemed the same, just endless rows of trees and shadow. And then I heard it again, the soft scraping sound, the low rasp, closer now. Closer, but still out of sight. A presence. Something moving in the dark, just behind me, but never seen. Never fully there. But I could feel it. I could feel it with every fiber of my being. Am I going crazy? The question gnawed at my mind, sharp and insistent. I could feel my grip on reality slipping, and the terrifying thing was that I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure what was real, what was just my mind breaking down. The light, the creature, the sounds in the dark, they were all too much, too overwhelming. I tried to push the thoughts aside, to focus on finding a way out, but every step I took only seemed to make things worse. I felt like I was sinking deeper into something, into nothing, with no way to climb out. It's not real. It can't be. It's not real. But the words fell apart in my mind as the world around me grew darker, the shadows thickening and pressing in. I couldn't escape it. No matter how far I walked, no matter how many turns I took, it felt like I was walking in circles. The trees, those ancient, gnarled giants, looked the same in every direction. Their twisted roots seemed to crawl across the ground, the branches stretching out like fingers that reached for me in the dark. Every path felt like the last one, and every direction led me back to where I started. I was lost. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no idea where I was anymore. The forest had swallowed me whole, and it was closing in tighter with every step I took. The world around me was starting to blur, like a watercolor painting smudging at the edges. The lines between reality and my mind began to fade. Is this the forest playing tricks on me? I stumbled, tripping over an unseen root, my hands bracing for impact as I fell to the ground. My heart hammered in my chest, a loud drumbeat that drowned out the world around me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I pushed myself to my feet, but my legs felt heavy, like I was dragging through thick mud. The light, that light, it was still out there, glowing faintly in the distance. But it was closer now, closer than it had ever been. And yet, no matter how fast I moved, no matter how many steps I took toward it, it always seemed to stay just out of reach. The more I tried to close the distance, the more it seemed to pull away. Like a sick joke. A game I couldn't win. My breath was shallow, panicked. The silence was suffocating. The trees, the shadows, they all began to look the same. Every corner I turned, every path I followed, only led to more of the same. The light stayed ahead, just out of reach, but it was growing brighter, pulling me toward it. I could almost feel its warmth on my skin, but every time I thought I was getting closer, the distance stretched longer. I wasn't making any progress. I was trapped in this loop, this endless cycle of trying to find my way, only to be led back to where I started. No, this can't be happening. It can't be real. But even as I thought it, doubt began to creep in. What if this was real? What if I was really stuck here, with no way out? The thought made my stomach twist in knots. What if the forest was alive? What if it was the one pulling the strings? What if it wanted me here? I pushed the thought away. Focus. Focus. But my thoughts were becoming jumbled, slipping out of my grasp. The world around me felt wrong, as though it had shifted somehow, like the very rules that governed the forest, the laws of nature itself, were changing. I couldn't trust my own perception anymore. I couldn't even trust the path under my feet, the trees that were supposed to be familiar. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, every leaf rustled with a voice I couldn't understand. The forest wasn't just confusing me anymore. It was disorienting me on purpose. The trees weren't just trees. They were something else. They had become part of the labyrinth, part of the trap. I could feel the cold creeping in, seeping through the soles of my boots, through my clothes, down to my bones. The light, it wasn't just distant now. It was closer. I could see its soft glow flickering just ahead, dancing between the trees, always a few steps ahead of me. But I couldn't get any closer. The harder I tried, the further it moved. It felt like the forest itself was taunting me, like it was playing with me, leading me deeper into its grip. Am I going crazy? I asked myself that question again, louder this time, but it didn't seem to make any difference. My own thoughts felt alien, disconnected. The fear that had first clung to me like a shadow now sat in the pit of my stomach, growing heavier with each passing moment. I turned again, desperate to find something familiar, anything that would show me the way out. But everything was the same. The same trees. The same branches. The same flickering light. I couldn't even remember which way I'd come from. Was it behind me? To my left? Did it matter anymore? And that's when the realization hit me, the terrifying, soul-crushing thought that I had been walking for hours, for what could have been days, and I had made no progress. No direction, no path that led me anywhere but deeper into this nightmare. I was not getting out. The light was closer now, so close I could almost hear it, the faint hum of its presence, like the buzzing of a million tiny wings. But I knew better than to chase it. If I went toward it, it would slip away again, just like it had before. I can't. The panic started to rise. My breath became ragged, uneven, as I desperately searched for some way out, some way to break free from this maddening loop. But the truth was inescapable now. I wasn't just lost. I was trapped. And as I stood there in the oppressive silence, the light, that cursed light, grew even brighter, drawing me in until I couldn't tell where it ended and I began. I had no choice but to follow it. I stopped walking. The forest around me was silent, still, but my mind was a whirlpool of thoughts, of questions I couldn't answer. My body screamed at me to run, to get away from the light, to flee from this suffocating feeling that had wrapped itself around me. But my legs felt like they were made of lead, and I couldn't move. Not anymore. It was as if someone had reached inside me, grabbed my insides, and held me in place. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to focus, trying to think clearly, but the weight of fear, dread, pressed down on me, clouding my thoughts. What the hell is happening? I needed to think. I had to make a decision. This was too much. It wasn't just a bad hike, wasn't just some natural misdirection. This was something more. But what? What was it? My breath came in shallow gasps. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve, but it didn't help. Sweat kept pouring down my face, and my vision blurred with the constant movement of the trees, the shadows that swirled at the edge of my consciousness. Is it natural? I tried to hold on to that thought. Maybe I had just wandered too far off the trail. Maybe this was some trick of the light, some shadow play that the forest threw at weary hikers. But something told me it wasn't that simple. No. The feeling, the overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone, that something was out there with me, watching me, it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like just the forest. It felt wrong. Is this some kind of hallucination? I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the thought. I wasn't delirious. I hadn't been out here long enough for that. But the longer I stood still, the more those words seemed to creep back into my mind. I'd heard stories. People who got lost in the wild. People who saw things that weren't there. People who came back from the woods changed, broken. No. Focus. Don't think like that. But how could I focus? How could I stay calm when my surroundings felt like they were shifting under my feet, when the shadows seemed to grow, reaching for me? When the air had become so thick with something that it was hard to breathe? Every sound felt amplified, as if the forest was closing in around me, whispering its secrets. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded like footsteps. Footsteps that were too heavy, too deliberate to be anything natural. I turned back toward the light, the glow that had been drawing me in, taunting me. What is that thing? It flickered at the edges of my vision, like a distant star, a beacon. Or was it something more? The light wasn't normal. I could feel that now. It wasn't just some random flash of fireflies. It had a quality to it, something ethereal, almost alive. Is it real? The question hung in the air like a heavy fog. The light felt real, but did it belong to this world? Or was it something other? Something not bound by the same rules I had always known. Something beyond my comprehension. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, to find some thread of logic to hold on to. But I couldn't. The longer I stood here, the more I realized logic was slipping away. This wasn't just a bad situation, a wrong turn in the woods. This was something else. I opened my eyes and looked around. The forest was the same. The trees were the same, the shadows were the same, and yet everything felt foreign. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know if I was in the same place anymore. Was I walking in circles? Had I passed this same spot over and over, trapped in a loop, in some twisted game I didn't understand? It's not just the forest. It's something else. The light was so close now, so bright, like a moth drawn to a flame. Should I follow it? My thoughts were scattered. A part of me screamed to run, to get away from this unnatural pull, this feeling that something was wrong. But another part, a darker part of me, whispered, what if it's the only way out? I had to decide. Do I turn back? I could try to retrace my steps. But would that even help? What if I'd been walking the wrong way all along? What if there was no way back? And then the thought hit me with terrifying clarity. What if the way back was already gone? I could feel the light creeping up on me. It was almost close enough to touch. Almost too close. What if I'm already too far gone to escape? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as I stood frozen, my heart beating louder than the silence of the forest. I couldn't stop myself. The thoughts were coming faster now, racing through my mind like a stampede. What if something was following me? watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and the oppressive silence of the forest only seemed to heighten my anxiety. The air felt thick, like I was walking through it with weights tied to my ankles. It's just my mind playing tricks on me. I told myself that over and over, trying to ground myself in reality. But even as I whispered those words, I knew they didn't help. The fear was too real. The creeping sense that I wasn't alone, that something or someone was just behind me, out of sight, watching me from the shadows, it wouldn't go away. It was too persistent, too invasive. I took a deep breath, forced myself to keep moving, but every step felt like a battle. The ground beneath my feet was uneven, and the trees loomed like dark sentinels, towering over me. Their twisted branches seemed to shift in the corner of my eye, reaching toward me. It's nothing. Just the wind, I told myself, but the doubt clung to me like a second skin. I'm being ridiculous. There's no one here. But then, the silence broke. A snap of a twig, sharp and distinct, echoed through the air. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, my body locked in place. My breath caught in my throat. It's nothing. It's nothing. But then came another sound. The rustle of leaves. The softest whisper of movement from just behind me. I could feel it, like something was right there, just out of view, waiting for me to turn around. No. I can't do this. I can't keep running from my own shadow. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts, trying to banish the paranoia. I was just hearing things. I had to focus. I had to stay in control. The longer I stayed in the woods, the more my mind began to twist, turning every sound, every flicker of movement into a threat. But it wasn't just the noises. It was the feeling of being watched. The feeling of eyes on my back. The sensation that something was just waiting for me to slip up, to make a mistake. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something, someone standing in the shadows, staring at me with eyes that I could never forget. But nothing. The forest was empty. Still. Silent. You're losing it. This is just the fear talking. I turned back to face the path, forcing my steps to stay steady. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The sound of my own heartbeat was deafening, too loud in my ears, as if it were the only thing I could hear. My pulse raced, and my hands were clammy. The air seemed to thicken with every breath I took, pressing on me like a weight I couldn't escape. The light, that damned light, was still ahead, flickering just out of reach. I should keep moving toward it. It was the only direction, the only thing that could pull me out of this maze of trees. But then, that thought hit me again. What if it's not real? I shook my head. Stop it. Stop thinking like that. The more I thought about it, the more the paranoia dug its claws in deeper. What if it's not the forest that's wrong? What if it's me? What if I had already lost my mind, and the forest was just a reflection of what was happening to me? What if I was already trapped in my own head, lost to the grip of my own fear? I couldn't let myself spiral like this. I couldn't give into it. I had to keep going. But with every step, the sense of being followed grew stronger. The weight of the unseen eyes bore down on me, suffocating, heavy. I could almost feel the breath on the back of my neck, the steady thrum of something unseen, just out of reach. It's not real. It's not real. But the words didn't make it go away. The shadows between the trees seemed darker now, thicker, as if they were closing in around me. The branches twisted like fingers, reaching for me, just waiting to pull me into the dark. I could feel the air growing colder, like a chill was creeping into my bones. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. I glanced behind me again, almost afraid of what I might see. Nothing. But still, the sense of being watched didn't let up. The feeling that something was there, something waiting for me, stalking me, was relentless. It was the kind of fear that makes you question your own sanity, makes you wonder if you're really alone after all. You're not crazy. Just focus. Keep moving. Get out of here. But as I took another step, I couldn't shake the question that kept gnawing at the back of my mind. What if I'm not alone? The air grew colder with each passing minute, the shadows of the trees lengthening as the sun dipped lower behind the mountains. I had hoped to make it to some clearing, some patch of open sky, before night completely swallowed the woods, but it was too late for that. The forest had already started to close in around me, and the last remnants of daylight were slipping away. The light I had been chasing, no, that thing, was still there, just ahead, flickering like a will-o'-the-wisp, taunting me. I couldn't stop moving, couldn't afford to lose sight of it. But the deeper I went, the more oppressive the darkness became. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, brushing against my skin, like they were guiding me down this path or maybe pulling me deeper into the woods. The ground beneath my boots was soft, uneven, and the underbrush rustled with every step. The familiar sounds of the forest were gone now, replaced by eerie silence, punctuated only by my breath and the sound of my footsteps. It was almost like the night had its own heartbeat, a slow, methodical pulse that seemed to echo through the woods. But the worst part was the light. It had changed. It wasn't just a distant glow anymore, it had grown brighter, closer. I couldn't understand how it was still ahead of me, no matter how fast I walked. It was as though it was always just a few steps beyond my reach, leading me further into the dark, deeper into the unknown. What the hell is it? The question kept circling in my mind like a vulture, but there were no answers. There was only the feeling, that suffocating sensation that I was being drawn towards something, pulled into an inescapable web. Something malevolent. I tried to shake the thought, tried to convince myself that I could just keep walking, that if I kept moving, I would find my way out. But the night was closing in, and every step seemed to bring me closer to the heart of the forest, closer to the source of that strange light. My heart began to race, and every crack of a branch underfoot, every distant snap of a twig, felt like a threat. The woods were alive and watching, and the deeper I went, the more it felt like they were closing in around me. I glanced over my shoulder again, but the forest was empty. There was nothing but the oppressive darkness, the feeling of being watched, of being followed. It was like the trees themselves had turned on me, their bark warping into faces, their branches twisting into hands, all reaching for me. No. Stay focused. Don't look back. Keep moving forward. But every fiber of my being screamed to turn around, to run, to get away from this place. Every instinct told me that I was heading straight into a trap, that the light wasn't leading me to safety, but towards something worse. Yet, despite all my doubts, despite the gnawing fear that twisted my gut, I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. There was nothing else to do. The light was still ahead, still pulling me, drawing me deeper into the blackened woods. What if I'm already too far gone to turn back? The thought chilled me to the bone, but I kept walking, my pace quickening as the darkness seemed to grow thicker. I stumbled, my feet catching on the uneven ground, but I forced myself to keep going. The light flickered in the distance, no longer distant at all. It was right there, just ahead, closer than it had ever been. And with every step I took, the forest around me seemed to grow darker, the air heavier, as if the very atmosphere was conspiring to keep me here. It's too late to turn back now. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but time seemed to stretch and warp in the oppressive dark. The only thing that was real was that damn light, so close now, its glow sharp against the night. It felt almost like a presence, like something sentient, something that wanted me to come closer. I took another step, and then another, my breath ragged in my chest. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't even remember why I was so afraid. Wasn't I just following the light? Wasn't this what I was supposed to do? But the closer I got, the more I realized that I had no idea what I was walking toward. I couldn't even remember why I had thought this was a good idea in the first place. The woods had swallowed up all my thoughts, leaving only a hollow fear. And the closer the light got, the clearer it became that whatever it was, whatever was out there, it wasn't something I could understand. It wasn't something I could escape. The darkness was overwhelming now, like a suffocating blanket that smothered every ounce of hope I had left. My steps echoed in the silence, but it was no longer real silence. The forest had come alive, but not in the way I had ever known it. The trees groaned and creaked like old bones protesting the weight of the night. Every gust of wind seemed to whistle with a voice of its own, carrying whispers that slid under my skin, prickling the back of my neck. It was as if the forest itself was talking to me. The light, that damned light, was still ahead, closer now, but it felt more like a predator than a guide. It flickered, twisted, and pulsed like it was alive, its movements erratic, as if it were following me instead of the other way around. Then came a sound, something sharp, something that cut through the night. A cracking noise, deep and loud. My heart skipped a beat as I whipped my head around, searching the shadows. There was nothing. Just the trees, their twisted limbs creaking under the weight of the wind. But it wasn't just the trees. There was something else. A soft rustling, like footsteps, moving in time with my own, just behind me. I spun again, but still nothing. The forest was empty. It had to be. I was alone. Right? The wind picked up, howling through the branches, its mournful song echoing in the distance. It wasn't the wind itself that unsettled me, though. It was the way it sounded, almost like it was laughing, a hollow, eerie laugh that made my blood run cold. I could hear it swirling around me, pulling at my clothes, tugging at my hair, as if something invisible was trying to touch me, to claim me. The creaking of the trees grew louder, like old doors swinging on rusty hinges, groaning under a weight they couldn't bear. The branches scratched against each other, creating a noise like dry fingers running over stone. It sounded wrong, unnatural, as though the trees were alive, reaching, waiting for me to slip. I couldn't trust the sounds anymore. I couldn't even trust the ground beneath my feet. The further I went, the more distorted everything became. The trees, once familiar, now loomed over me like towering giants, their gnarled branches swaying in the wind, their shadows stretching and shifting in ways that didn't make sense. I felt as if the forest was closing in, its dark fingers curling around me, trapping me in a nightmare that wouldn't end. But the light, the only constant in this madness, was still there. I couldn't tell if it was moving or if I was. Every time I thought I had gained ground, it seemed to grow brighter, more alive, pulling me deeper into its clutches. Then, another sound. This one, sharp and deliberate, was unmistakable, a snap, not of a twig this time, but something heavier. A footstep. a deliberate step on the soft forest floor. My pulse quickened. This wasn't the wind. It wasn't the trees. Someone or something was out there. I stopped, frozen in place, my breath ragged. I tried to listen through the pounding in my chest, through the deafening rush of my own heartbeat. The rustling continued, now accompanied by a faint scraping sound, like claws on bark. It's just the wind. Just the wind. But I knew that wasn't true. The wind didn't leave marks on the ground. It didn't sound like something, was following me. I spun again, this time slower, more deliberate, my eyes darting over every shadow, scanning for any movement. The forest was still, save for the wind. No footsteps. No rustling. Just the weight of the night pressing down on me. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The light. It was closer now, just a few feet away, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. But the moment I turned toward it, it flickered, like a breath caught in its chest, and then it was gone. I froze, staring into the darkness where it had been, my mind racing. I couldn't see it anymore, but I felt it, as if the space where it had been marked. Something had changed. And then, the rustling. The footsteps, clear and deliberate now, came closer. I wasn't alone. The sounds had stopped being part of the forest. They were part of me now, an inescapable presence that was moving with me, stalking me. The trees weren't just whispering anymore. They were watching, their branches moving like arms reaching for me. The very air felt alive, and it pressed in on me from all sides. With every step, the sounds grew louder, the shadows more oppressive, until it felt like the whole forest had become one vast, creeping thing, chasing me, drawing me toward the unknown. I couldn't tell if I was still running toward the light or away from it. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. The air thickened around me as I stumbled through the underbrush, my breath ragged, the weight of panic pressing on my chest. The light was gone now, vanished like a mirage, leaving me to stumble blindly through the darkness. My mind raced, but I couldn't find a clear thought, just flashes of fear, the relentless pull of something unseen but always there. Then came the sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind, an eerie rustle of leaves, a crack of twig underfoot. But it wasn't the wind. No, this was something else. Something deliberate. I turned, heart slamming in my chest, but there was nothing behind me. Just the same endless blackness of the forest, swallowing everything. But it wasn't nothing. It was there, I could feel it. That sense of being watched had turned into something far worse, something more tangible. It was a presence, an oppressive force, creeping up from behind, just out of sight, moving in time with my own steps. Every movement I made, every breath I took, seemed to trigger it, making it closer. I wasn't running from the forest anymore. I was running from it. I broke into a full sprint, ignoring the branches that scratched at my arms, the rocks that tripped my feet. My lungs burned, my legs screamed for rest, but I couldn't stop. The thing behind me, it wasn't stopping. I could feel it getting closer with every step. It was like a shadow that stretched and pulled after me, wrapping tighter around my body, suffocating me with its presence. A snap of a twig sounded too loud in the silence, and I whipped around again, my eyes desperately scanning the darkness. The forest looked the same, empty, silent, watching, but I knew better now. It was there, just behind me, moving with the precision of something that had all the time in the world. I broke into a side path, hoping to confuse whatever was following me, but it didn't matter. It was following me. It knew where I was going, like it had already anticipated my every move. Ow! The thought barely crossed my mind before I heard it, a low, guttural sound, not quite a growl, but something close to it, a vibration that rattled in the very bones of the trees. And then, there was a shift in the air. The temperature dropped. The very space around me seemed to warp, like the air was thickening, growing heavier. I could hear it now, too, the sound of movement, like something, was walking just behind me. The footsteps didn't match mine. They were slower, heavier, but they were right there, keeping pace with me. I tried to run faster, but it was no use. The chase had already begun. It was like I was in the grip of a nightmare, but there was no waking up. The faster I went, the closer it got. The space between us closed with each heartbeat, each breath, until it felt like I could almost hear its footsteps echoing inside my own skull. The trees blurred past me, shadows in the dark, their shapes twisted and indistinct, as if the forest itself was warping to keep me from escaping. There were no signs of a path anymore, no markers of where I had been or where I was going. It was just the endless stretch of trees, the dark that surrounded me from every side. And still, it was there. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear its breath or its movements, but I knew it was behind me, just a breath away, always there, waiting to catch me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck prickle as the forest closed in. I had nowhere to go, no place to hide, no way to outrun it. But it wasn't just the thing behind me that I was running from. It was the realization, the terror that I couldn't outrun it, that it wasn't just chasing me through the forest, it was chasing me through my own mind, pushing me to the brink of madness. The panic clawed at me from within, and the world around me twisted into something unrecognizable. The trees, the shadows, the very ground beneath me, all of it became one mass of not rightness. And the light, that damn light, flickered again. There was no mistaking it now. It was there, ahead of me, just as it had been. But now, it felt like it was leading me into something worse. I ran toward it, toward the light, even though I knew it was a trap. Even though I could feel the dark thing at my back, pressing closer, closer. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn, to fight, to do anything other than run. But my legs carried me forward, toward the light, toward the one thing that seemed real in this madness. And then, for a moment, the sound behind me stopped. Silence. But it wasn't a comforting silence. It was the kind of silence that made your heart pound louder, that made the world feel even more empty. And then came the worst sound yet, a whisper, low and breathy, right in my ear. Run. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't human. It was a cold, ancient thing, a whisper that sent ice crawling under my skin. I couldn't stop. I couldn't. Not now. I kept running. I could feel it now, something more than just a flickering light that had once seemed harmless. This wasn't a natural phenomenon, no fleeting trick of the eye or wayward firefly. No, this was something far more sinister, and it was alive. I could feel its presence tugging at my mind, pushing at my thoughts, warping the space around me. It had stopped being just a chase. Now, it felt like a hunt. The air had thickened, a dense, heavy weight pressing on my chest as I ran. The world was starting to slip away from me, bending, twisting, until the trees looked like they were leaning in, their gnarled limbs outstretched like hands trying to grab me, to pull me back into the darkness. Every step I took felt like I was sinking deeper into something that was not real, and yet, it felt more real than anything I'd ever experienced. The light was still ahead of me, glowing faintly in the distance, but it wasn't the light that mattered anymore. It was the presence behind me, the force that seemed to follow every move, every breath, and every thought. I wasn't just running anymore, I was fleeing. Fleeing from something that wasn't of this world, something that had no place in the woods, no place in the reality I had once understood. I glanced over my shoulder once more, half expecting to see the thing behind me, its shape forming out of the darkness, a monstrous silhouette in the woods. But there was nothing but the blackness, swallowing everything. Yet, that feeling didn't leave. The sensation that something was just there, just out of sight, but always too close. It was like being followed by a shadow that you couldn't outrun, a presence you couldn't escape. But this wasn't a shadow. This wasn't just the darkness of the forest. I could feel it now, the unnaturalness, the wrongness of it all. The light ahead was no longer just a light. It was a beacon, but not of safety. It called to me, but not in a way that invited comfort or relief. It was pulling me in, yes, but it was pulling me deeper into the heart of something other, something ancient and malevolent. I heard the sound again, closer now, sharper. A rustling, not from the trees, but from the ground itself, as though something, or someone, was moving under the earth, right beneath me. I froze, panic crawling up my throat. My feet felt stuck to the ground, as if the very soil had grown roots, holding me in place. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, trying to ignore the rush of terror. But then, I felt it, the shift. The air around me seemed to thicken even more, the wind dying away entirely, leaving only a suffocating stillness that pressed down on me from all sides. The forest, which had once felt alive with the sounds of nature, now felt dead. There was no sound of birds or insects, no breeze in the trees, no rustling of leaves. There was only silence. A thick, oppressive silence that stretched out like an endless void, filling my ears, suffocating my thoughts. And then I saw it. The light flickered again, just ahead, but now it wasn't just a simple glow. It seemed to pulse, the rhythm almost like a heartbeat. It grew brighter, then dimmed, but it was no longer just an innocent speck of light, it was the thing chasing me. I could feel it, pushing against my chest, clawing at my mind. It was like the light itself was breathing, alive and aware, and it was pulling me toward it. I wasn't running toward the light, I was running from it. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't think. The light, it wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't just light. It was a thing, something that had no place in the world, something not from the forest. It wasn't just glowing, it was pulling me in, tugging at me like a current of water. It was an influence that worked on more than just my body, but my mind, my very soul. I could feel it trying to take hold of me. And in the distance, just beyond the trees, I saw it, the shape. It was tall, too tall, its outline flickering in and out of sight. The shadows around it bent and shifted unnaturally, warping in a way that made my eyes ache to look at it. It was the thing that had been following me, but now it had form. It wasn't a shadow anymore, it was something tangible, something real, and it was moving toward me. My heart pounded in my chest, my body frozen in place, terror seizing every muscle. The light, the thing that had been leading me, wasn't guiding me to safety. It was leading me to it. To them. I didn't know if I could run anymore. My legs felt like they were made of stone. The light flickered once more, brighter now, as the shadows stretched closer, and all I could feel was that overwhelming, inescapable sense of being pulled into something I couldn't understand. The trees shifted again, but this time they weren't just shifting. They were closing in. And then I heard the voice. It wasn't words, it was something deeper. Something primal. It was the sound of the forest itself speaking to me. Tum. And I knew, with a cold, final certainty, that I was no longer in control. Whatever this was, it was no longer just pursuing me, it was waiting for me. The light, the shadow, the forest, they were all part of it now. And there was no escaping it. It wasn't just the forest. It was them. I couldn't see anymore. The world around me had dissolved into an endless void of darkness. It was like the forest had swallowed me whole, and I was left in a place where time and space no longer made sense. My feet moved instinctively, but each step felt like I was wading through thick mud, the air so dense I could hardly breathe. The light, still flickered in the distance, but it wasn't guiding me anymore. It was pulling me closer to something I couldn't escape. My mind was spinning, each thought tangled with the next, and every instinct screamed for me to turn around, to stop running, to somehow wake up from this nightmare. But there was no waking up. Not here. The trees around me were no longer familiar, their shapes warped and twisted, as if they were mocking me. They stood like dark sentinels, their branches reaching out, scratching at my skin as I passed by. I stumbled, my legs shaking, but I kept moving, kept running, though I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I had to keep moving forward, away from the thing that was following me. I dared to glance over my shoulder, but I didn't see it. There was nothing behind me. Just darkness. And yet, I could feel it. That presence. It was there, somewhere just beyond my reach, always just a step behind, closing on me with every breath I took. I couldn't escape it. It was like a shadow, always there, never leaving, always waiting for me to make the wrong move. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath shallow and ragged. The more I ran, the more I realized there was no path back. The forest, once so expansive, now seemed like an endless maze, every turn leading me deeper into its suffocating grip. I couldn't find the trail. I couldn't find the way out. The silence that had once been oppressive now became deafening, an all-encompassing soundlessness that made the pounding of my heart and my ears feel like a drum. The wind had stopped completely. There was no rustling of the leaves, no movement of branches. Just my footsteps and something else. A soft, rhythmic tapping just at the edge of my hearing. It was like the forest itself was whispering to me, urging me to stay. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't let whatever it was, whatever this thing was, catch me. I wasn't going to let it. I refused. I picked up the pace, pushing myself harder, faster, but my legs were weakening. Every muscle in my body felt like it was on fire. I was moving purely on adrenaline now, not thinking, just running. The world had become a blur, the trees, the rocks, the ground beneath me, all merged into one endless, featureless landscape. I couldn't see the sky anymore. I couldn't see anything but the dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was closing in around me, pulling me into its depths. There was no escape. The light ahead was getting brighter again, pulsing like a heartbeat. But it wasn't salvation. It was the trap. It was the thing that had been chasing me all along, pulling me in. I reached out, desperate, my fingers grazing the bark of a nearby tree, trying to ground myself, to hold on to something real. But the tree seemed to shift beneath my hand, its surface slick and cold. It wasn't just the darkness that was playing tricks on me, it was something else. The world tilted, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. My knees buckled, and I hit the ground hard, pain shooting up my leg. My breathing was ragged now, and I could feel the sweat pouring down my face, mixing with the dirt. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't. I struggled to stand, panic creeping up my throat. And then, for a split second, I thought I saw something in the distance, another shadow, moving in the corner of my eye. It wasn't the light. It wasn't a tree. It was it, the thing that had been following me, the thing that had been waiting for me to break. And I realized then, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, that it wasn't just following me anymore. It was waiting for me to give in. My legs gave way again, but this time I didn't try to fight it. I fell forward, my body crumpling against the ground, the dirt biting into my palms. My mind was a blur of fear, of terror that had no name, of something beyond comprehension that was closing in, suffocating me. And all I could hear was the sound of my breath and the quiet, relentless pulse of the light, growing louder. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. I don't know how long I've been running. Hours? Days? Time has lost all meaning in this forsaken place. The panic that gripped me before has turned into something else, something worse. I've stopped trying to fight it, stopped trying to outrun whatever it is that's hunting me. It's pointless. The more I run, the more I realize I can't escape. I don't know where I am anymore. The trees have stopped being trees. The ground no longer feels solid beneath my feet. It all blends together, darkness, shadows, faint glimmers of light, like distant stars in a void. I can't even remember what I was searching for, what I hoped to find out here. It's all so wrong. At first, I told myself this was some kind of illusion, that maybe I was just lost, that the lights I've seen, the thing following me, could all be explained away by exhaustion, by fear playing tricks on my mind. But I've stopped pretending. There's no denying it now. This is real. And it's hunting me. I try to breathe, but my chest feels tight. Every inhalation is a struggle, my breath shallow and ragged. I can't stop my hands from trembling, can't stop the cold sweat that coats my skin. I feel watched. I feel pursued. There's no one else here. It's just me, alone, in this forest that feels like it's alive, aware of me, moving with me, shifting around me. The trees creak and groan in the distance. The wind howls, but it doesn't feel like wind anymore. It feels like a voice. It feels like the forest is whispering to me, its branches curling in on themselves as though it's waiting for something. Waiting for me. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The exhaustion is too much. Every step feels like I'm dragging my body through quicksand, my legs burning, my mind clouded by a fog of terror. I've tried to find a way out, tried to backtrack, tried to turn and follow my own footprints. But it's all the same. The path is never the same. Every direction is the wrong direction. And the light, it's always there. Flickering, glowing, pulling me in, and no matter how far I go, no matter how fast I run, I can't escape it. It's not just a light. It's alive. It's watching me. It knows exactly where I am, and it's waiting. I try to convince myself that I'm imagining it. I've lost my mind, haven't I? This must be a dream or a hallucination. But deep down, I know the truth. It's not. I can't escape. I stumble, my foot catching on something, and I fall to the ground. My breath catches in my throat as I crash to the earth, pain lancing through my side. I struggle to get up, but my limbs feel heavy, like they don't belong to me anymore. I close my eyes, trying to block out the fear, trying to shut it all away. But then I hear it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind me. I don't even need to look. I know it's there. I feel it in my bones. I feel its presence, like a cold hand resting on the back of my neck. It's so close now, I can hear its breath. It's breathing with me, matching my every move, its pulse syncing with mine. I don't know if it's a person or something else, something worse. It doesn't matter. I've lost. The realization hits me like a physical blow. There is no escape. There never was. I try to stand, but my legs give way beneath me again. I can't keep running. I can't outrun this. I want to scream, but the sound dies in my throat. My chest tightens as I feel the weight of the air around me grow heavier, the silence pressing in on me. It feels like the world is closing in, suffocating me, pulling me under. And the worst part? I know that whatever is following me, whatever it is, it knows. It knows I can't run anymore. It knows I'm broken. And it's getting closer. Closer than ever. I close my eyes again, but this time I don't wish to escape. I don't wish to wake up. All I want now is for it to stop, for it to take me, for this endless chase to end. Because I can't fight anymore. The air around me feels thick, suffocating, as though the very atmosphere is turning against me. My body is frozen, locked in place by an overwhelming sense of terror. I don't know how much time has passed, but I can't seem to move. Every fiber of my being screams to run, to flee from whatever is behind me, but my legs won't obey. I can hear it now, those footsteps. They're unmistakable. Clear, deliberate, as though the thing behind me is following my every movement. The rhythm of its steps is slow, measured, as though it knows I can't escape. I try to convince myself it's just my mind playing tricks, just my overactive imagination, some paranoid delusion brought on by fear and exhaustion. But the sound doesn't stop. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. It's like a slow, rhythmic march, getting closer and closer. But every time I turn around, there's nothing there. Just the blackness of the forest, thick and all-consuming, and the faint flicker of that damned light in the distance. My heart beats so loudly I can barely hear anything else. It's as if my entire body has been reduced to that one pulsing sound, that singular rhythm thumping in my chest. I close my eyes and try to take deep breaths, but each inhale feels like it's suffocating me further. My mouth is dry, and the taste of metal coats my tongue. I can't tell if it's a person behind me. The steps don't sound human. They sound wrong. There's something unnatural about the way they fall on the ground, like the feet, if they are feet, aren't quite touching the earth the way they should. The noise is too fluid, too seamless. It almost sounds like it's gliding. But then I hear it again, closer this time. Step. Pause. I can feel the presence even without looking. It's there, hovering just out of sight. A shadow in the corner of my vision, like a part of the darkness itself that has become alive. I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel human. It doesn't feel natural. I can't breathe. My chest tightens. The panic is clawing its way up my throat, choking me. I try to move anything just to break the stillness, but I'm paralyzed. My body refuses to listen to my mind. Every part of me is screaming to run, but I can't. And then, I hear it. A voice. Not a whisper, not a sound carried by the wind, but a voice clear and cold. It's not words. It's a presence. A thought that's been planted inside my head. Something that feels alien. Something that wasn't there before. It's saying something. I can't make it out, but I know it's talking to me. I turn again, but there's nothing there, just shadows, just the suffocating darkness pressing in from all sides. The sound of its steps is louder now, almost too close. My blood runs cold as I feel it, the unmistakable sensation of eyes on me. It's here. I try to scream, but the sound is caught in my throat, a desperate gasp that echoes only in my head. My mind is spinning, trying to make sense of the chaos, but it doesn't work. The steps are getting closer. Closer. And I can't see it. I don't know if I want to see it. Is it real? Or is it my mind cracking under the weight of this nightmare? A faint, almost imperceptible sound breaks through the air. A soft dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the ground, slow and deliberate. It's too close now, closer than ever. I finally summon the courage to turn, and this time, I see it. But only for a second. It's a shadow. No, not just a shadow. It's like the darkness itself, shaped, shifting, moving in ways that no human body should. A form that isn't quite right, that's too tall, too thin, and yet, it's there. It's there, just in the corner of my vision, but it's enough to make my heart race, to make the air around me grow colder. I turn away again, but this time, I don't look back. Because I know it's real. And I know I can't escape it. It's here. It's always been here. The sound of footsteps behind me never stops. They follow me, rhythmically, in perfect sync with my own steps, yet they aren't mine. They're heavier, more deliberate, closer, and closer still. I can feel it, even though I don't dare look. I don't want to look. What if it's just my mind, broken by fear, playing tricks on me? What if it's nothing? What if I'm losing my grip on reality? But then, the steps stop. There's a silence now, no rustling of leaves, no movement in the air, no sound at all, except for my heartbeat. Thump. 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 It echoes in my ears, frantic and desperate. I freeze, holding my breath. My eyes dart around the darkened forest, scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing. I wait, hoping for a sign, a reason to believe this is just in my head. The longer I stand still, the more I feel it. The pressure in the air. The feeling that I'm not alone. It's still there. The silence stretches on, but I can't shake the feeling that something is moving, something just out of sight. My mind races, trying to make sense of the sensation. It's like the darkness itself has grown thicker around me, like it's closing in, wrapping around me, pressing against me. And then, I hear it again, the unmistakable sound of a footstep. Step. I whip my head around, but there's nothing. Just trees. Just the black void of the forest stretching endlessly in all directions. No figure. No shape. No thing. The light. The strange, glowing flicker in the distance, still there, still hovering like an unsettling beacon. But the sound, it's still behind me, closer now. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. It's not an animal. It's not a bird. It's too deliberate to be anything natural. It doesn't make sense. The footsteps are so close now, I can almost feel the breath of whatever is behind me. I swallow hard, but my throat feels tight. My mind is screaming at me to run, to move, but my body won't respond. It's as if the fear has paralyzed me, rooted me to the spot. I try to rationalize. I have to be imagining it. It's the exhaustion, the disorientation. It's the isolation. It has to be. There's no way something could be following me out here. Not in this empty, silent forest. But then the sound comes again, this time unmistakably close. Too close. Step. I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Every nerve in my body is screaming. I don't want to turn around. I don't want to face whatever it is. But I can't stop myself. Slowly, inch by inch, I twist my body, my heart pounding in my chest. The air feels like it's thickening, like the very space around me is closing in, suffocating me. My hands are clammy. My breath shallow. And then, in the farthest reaches of my vision, I see it. A shadow. Not just any shadow, but one that doesn't belong. It's darker than the night around me, deeper, moving in a way that isn't natural. It's shifting, morphing, bending the darkness around it. It's tall, unnaturally so, and it moves as if it's aware of me, aware of my fear. I can't make out its form. It's like the night itself, but with a shape, with intent. It's not something my mind can comprehend. My breath catches in my throat. It's real. The shadow moves, impossibly fast. It's getting closer, and I can't run, can't hide. I want to scream, but the air in my lungs is frozen. It's too close now, its presence filling every inch of space, making everything else fade. I can feel its weight pressing down on me, like it's drawing nearer to devour me whole. I turn away, but it's no use. It's everywhere. It's behind me, in front of me, closing in on all sides. I hear it again, the footsteps, now unmistakably a part of the darkness, a part of it. No more guessing. No more wondering. I know the truth now. I am not alone. And the thing behind me is coming. There's no escape. My legs ache. My chest burns with every ragged breath. I'm running, but I don't know where I'm going, just away. Away from the thing behind me. From the darkness that presses in, from the shadow that moves just beyond my sight. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, but stopping isn't an option. The fear is the only thing keeping me moving now. Without it, I'd be paralyzed. Every step feels like it's draining the last bit of strength from my body. The ground beneath me is uneven, but I don't care. I stumble, almost fall, but I force myself back up, the terror fueling me, pushing me forward. It's like there's a fire in my veins, a pain so sharp that it almost feels like it's consuming me, but I can't let it stop me. If I stop, I know it will catch me. I hear the steps again. Closer. So close. It's as if whatever it is has gotten faster, is learning the rhythm of my movements, adapting to the frantic pace I've set. I can't even hear my own feet hitting the ground anymore over the pounding in my chest. The darkness is swallowing everything, closing in on me like a living thing, pulling me deeper into it with every desperate breath. It's not just the exhaustion. It's the weight of the fear, the pressure in my chest, the knot in my stomach that tightens with every second that passes. I can feel the blood rushing in my ears, feel my pulse like a drumbeat in my head. My body is starting to fail me. My legs are shaking, my hands are slick with sweat, but still, I run. I can't stop. I can't. The sounds in the forest are different now. The wind is silent, but there's something else, something soft, like a rustling, but it's all around me, closing in. It's no longer just the footsteps behind me. It's like something is moving through the air itself, wrapping itself around me. My breath is too quick, too shallow, and every inhale feels like I'm suffocating. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. My legs are giving out, my feet are bruised from the uneven ground, and my lungs feel like they're on fire. But I can't let myself stop. I can't let it catch me. I hear it again. The footsteps. Closer. Almost like it's right there, just behind me. The shadow. The presence. It's getting nearer, its footsteps growing louder with every frantic step I take. And I can feel it, too. That coldness, creeping along my skin, crawling under my flesh. It's like the air itself is turning against me, suffocating me, pulling me under. The fear is physical now. I can feel it in my muscles, in the tightness in my chest, in the way my body aches with each movement. I'm not sure how much more I can endure. My legs are trembling, barely holding me up, but I force myself to push on. Just a little longer. But the pain is overwhelming now. It's not just the physical exhaustion, it's the terror, the weight of the dread that has sunk deep into my bones. My body is trembling with fear, but I don't know if it's from the chase, or from something more, something that's deeper, more insidious than I can even begin to understand. The shadow is too close now. I don't need to look. I can feel it. I can sense it. It's there, just behind me, just a breath away. And that's when I hear it, the sound that stops me dead in my tracks. A voice. Not a whisper, not a sound carried on the wind, but a voice, clear and cold, like it's inside my head. It doesn't speak words. It's not language, it's presence. I feel it inside me. It's too much. My body can't take it anymore. I can't move. The fear has gone too deep, has turned into pain. And that's when it happens. The shadow is upon me. The light, its light, finally reaches me. It's not warm like I imagined a light should be. No, this is colder than the deepest night, colder than anything I've ever felt. It's not a light at all. It's a presence. A coldness that seeps into my bones, numbing my skin, and with it, all the fear I had felt before seems insignificant. This is something else. This is the end of everything. I feel it first in my chest. A sharp, painful pressure that feels like it's crushing me from the inside. I gasp for breath, but there's nothing to breathe. The air is thick, suffocating. And then, the world starts to slip away. The ground beneath my feet becomes soft, like sand slipping through my toes. But there's no ground. No earth. It's as if I'm floating, falling, sinking, dissolving into something far darker than the forest could ever be. I hear it. The voice, but this time it's not in my head. It's all around me, a chorus of whispers, impossible to understand. The voices swirl, blend together, like they're reaching out, pulling me in. The whispers become a chant, a steady rhythm of words I can't comprehend. They wrap themselves around me, each one colder than the last, dragging me deeper into the dark, deeper into the place that isn't real anymore. I can't focus. I can't see. I can't feel anything but the overwhelming cold, the crushing weight of the darkness closing in. The world around me seems to unravel, to distort in ways that make my mind scream in protest. The trees are gone. The forest is gone. It's just this cold emptiness, this feeling that I'm not alone, but I can't see, I can't know what it is. The light. It's not a light at all. It's a force. It's alive. It swirls around me, touching every part of my body, every inch of my soul. The cold seeps in deeper, and I feel my body going numb. It's pulling me in, drawing me closer to whatever waits in this place. My eyes search desperately for any sign of reality, anything familiar, but the world is breaking apart. There's no direction here, no way out. The shadows are all around me now, pressing in, filling every corner of my vision. They're not shapes. They're not things. They're just presence, just the overwhelming sense that something is watching me, something is waiting. I feel it now, the thing that has been chasing me. It's here. It's not a shadow. It's not just light. It's the absence. The space between things, the gap that exists in the world. And it's here, in the place where nothing makes sense. I can't hear my own voice, but I scream anyway. I scream into the emptiness, into the cold, into the dark, but it's all swallowed, all consumed by the nothingness that surrounds me. And then I know without a doubt. I am no longer in the world I knew. I have crossed into something else, something beyond the living, beyond the known. I am in the world of shadows, and there is no escape. The light dims, and with it, my sense of self begins to fade. The world around me shatters, and with it, everything I once was slips away into the void. The whispers grow louder, the cold deeper, and the shadows, they are all around me. And just as I feel myself slipping away, I hear it, a voice. My voice. But it's not mine anymore. Welcome. I don't know how long I've been drifting through this place, the world of shadows, of whispers. Time has no meaning here. I can't tell if I've been standing, lying, or walking. Everything is a blur of cold, of darkness, of an overwhelming sense that I'm being watched. But it's not just the watching. It's the feeling that it knows me. Knows everything. Every fear, every regret, every vulnerable thought I've ever had. And it's been waiting. I try to move, but my body feels stiff, like I'm fighting against something far stronger than I am. Every step is like dragging myself through thick, suffocating mud. I can barely keep my head up. The air is oppressive, and my thoughts are muddled, tangled in the endless, echoing whispers that have followed me since I entered this world. And then, suddenly, there's a shift. A disturbance in the air, a slight change in the temperature, this small flicker of something that is not darkness, not shadow. A presence. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that it's coming for me. I try to force my legs to move faster, but it's like the darkness itself is holding me in place, binding me with invisible chains. The air is thick, almost alive, pressing against me from all sides. I hear a rustle, faint at first, but growing louder, like something or someone moving through the blackness toward me. It's here. I don't know how to describe it, but it's huge. Not in size, but in presence. Like it fills the very air around me. I can feel it, I can sense it, before I even see it. Its form is shifting, fluid, like a shadow that doesn't stay in one shape long enough for me to fully comprehend. It's something primal, something from the depths of the unknown. A creature, but not a creature. It's as if the very fabric of reality itself is bending and twisting to make way for this thing. I hear a sound, a low, guttural growl like the distant rumble of thunder, but much more personal. It resonates deep inside me, like the sound of the earth groaning beneath the weight of an ancient force. My heart races, and I can feel my pulse in my throat. I want to run, but my legs are like stone. I can barely move. The shadow flickers before me, and I catch a glimpse, a shape that's both there and not there at the same time. It's a silhouette, but not human. Not animal. Something otherworldly. I see eyes. Eyes that gleam with an unnatural light, a cold, unfeeling light, like the glow of a fire that's burned too long and consumed everything it touched. They lock onto mine, and I feel my entire body freeze. It speaks, but not with words. It's a voice, but not voice. It's like its thoughts are entering my mind directly, bypassing language altogether, and I feel a weight on my chest, as though the very idea of this creature is trying to crush me. You are lost. The thought isn't a whisper, but a weight, a pressure. And you are mine now. My body trembles. I want to scream, but my mouth is dry, my voice lost in the crushing silence of the place. I can't breathe. The creature's presence is suffocating, and the air around me grows colder, thicker. I try to move, to pull myself away, but the darkness twists around me, making it impossible to see or think clearly. The ground beneath my feet vanishes, and I feel like I'm falling, spiraling into something deeper, something worse. You cannot run. The voice in my mind is mocking now, cold and endless. You are already here. I don't know what it is that makes me fight, but I do. I push back against the pressure, against the cold, against the overwhelming sense that it's all over. It's a hopeless struggle, but I struggle nonetheless, not knowing what I'm fighting for, only that I cannot give in to this thing. Not yet. The creature shifts again, closer now. I can feel its form, its shape, pressing against me from all sides. The whispers grow louder, a cacophony of voices now, all saying the same thing. You cannot escape. I can't tell if I'm running or if I'm standing still, but I move. I move because I have no choice. The shadow is moving with me, circling around me, too fast for me to catch a glimpse of it, too close for me to breathe without feeling its coldness seep through my skin. And then it speaks again, not in words, but in a sensation. It's like the knowledge of everything wrong, of everything lost, crashing down on me at once. You are part of this world now. And I realize, with sickening clarity, that it's not hunting me. It's claiming me. The weight of the creature's presence presses on me like a physical thing. My muscles burn with exhaustion, my limbs refuse to obey my commands. I stagger, my breath shallow, chest tight with panic. Every step I take feels like I'm dragging my body through thick, suffocating mud. I can't escape it. I can't escape them. The darkness around me is absolute. It is the kind of darkness that sinks into your bones, that makes you question whether you're still breathing, still alive. The air feels heavy, thick with something I can't name, something beyond the grasp of my senses. I can barely hear myself think over the pounding of my heart, the frantic thrum of blood rushing through my veins. My mind feels foggy, dulled, like I'm slowly losing my grip on reality. I want to stop. I want to sit down, rest, close my eyes, and just escape. But every time I try to slow down, I feel that terrible pull. The creature is still out there, still moving in the shadows, still hunting me. It never stops. Its presence is suffocating, a cold weight on my chest that presses harder the longer I stay in this twisted place. I can feel it behind me, closing in, always just out of sight, but never truly gone. I glance over my shoulder, only to see the blackness stretching out endlessly, an all-consuming void that mocks me. The sound of my breath, ragged and desperate, echoes in my ears. It feels like I'm drowning in the dark, in the fear, in the relentless pressure of the creature's pursuit. I force myself to keep moving, pushing my legs forward, though each step is like lifting a boulder. You are mine. The voice is not a sound but a sensation, like a cold wind sweeping through my mind. It's inside me now, twisting, turning, suffocating me from the inside out. I can't escape the thought. It wraps around me like tendrils of smoke, choking me, feeding off my fear. I stumble, my foot catching on an unseen root, and I fall. My hands scrape against the rough ground, my knees buckle beneath me. The fall is too much. I can't go on. Not anymore. The exhaustion is overwhelming, like the very air has turned against me. My body aches, my mind is a blur of terror, and I just want it to stop. But even as I lie there, on the cold earth, unable to move, I feel it, the creature is still there. It's not going to give me a break. It won't let me rest. The darkness around me seems to pulse with its presence, alive with the sense that it's watching, waiting. I don't dare look up, don't dare move, afraid that I'll see something even worse than the shadows. But the voice is there, again, inside my head, wrapping around my thoughts like a snake. You cannot hide. I close my eyes, clenching my fists, but I know it's pointless. There's no escape from this place, no way out. I'm trapped. Trapped in my own mind, in the darkness, in the unrelenting pursuit of something that has no mercy. It is a weight on my chest, on my soul. The darkness grows thicker, colder. The shadows press in closer. My breath quickens, but it doesn't matter. I can't outrun it. I can't outthink it. I can't escape. I open my eyes, but all I see is black. The light is gone. The creature is here. And I am no longer sure if I want to escape anymore. As the darkness presses in tighter, suffocating every breath, a strange clarity begins to form in my mind. It's not a rational thought, not something I can control, but something deep inside me is stirring, something from the farthest reaches of my memory. I remember the stories. The stories the locals used to tell in hushed tones around campfires. The whispered warnings about the Appalachian forests. The ones I brushed off as nothing more than old myths, foolish tales meant to scare tourists like me. But now, as I sit, frozen in the blackness of the trees, I realize how much truth there was in them. They spoke of a creature, an unnatural thing that roams the woods, its light both a lure and a curse. A light that leads people astray, pulling them deeper into the forest until they're lost in a maze of trees that never seem to end, paths that never lead anywhere. They spoke of those who had disappeared without a trace, leaving nothing behind but their last, terrified screams. The stories were always vague. The creature itself, they said, was more shadow than substance. A flicker of light, something almost human, but twisted, malevolent. And it wasn't just about the light. It was about them. The ones who were never seen again, who vanished like whispers into the night, leaving their friends and families to wonder what had happened. They were never found. Not dead. Not alive. Just gone. And the worst part? The legends claim the creature never left. It was always there, waiting for the next soul to fall prey to its grasp. I shake my head, trying to clear the fog, but the memories flood in, overwhelming. I recall an old woman in a small diner, her voice trembling as she warned me, "Stay away from the deep woods. You can't run from it once it notices you." She was just another eccentric, I thought. But now, with my breath shallow and the weight of the darkness pressing on me, I realize how wrong I was. It is here. The light flickers again, just ahead. It moves, slow, deliberate, like a pulse in the void. It is the same as in the stories, a beckoning glow that promises escape, but only delivers more confusion, more dread. The creature isn't just a monster. It's the forest itself. The forest is its prison and its domain. I am part of its story now. My name will be added to the list of the lost. And if there's any truth to the legends, no one will ever know what happened to me. I can feel the panic rising again, clawing at my chest. But something else rises within me, too. A cold resignation. A sickening acceptance that I'm just another chapter in the endless cycle of those who wander too far. It doesn't matter how much I fight, how fast I run. This is my fate now. The creature is closing in. The light flickers brighter, casting shadows that twist into shapes I can't comprehend. My mind fights to rationalize, but there's no room for reason here. The stories didn't warn me of this. They didn't warn me of how it feels to be hunted by something that doesn't need to move. The forest is its domain, its kingdom, and I'm nothing more than an intruder. As the light draws closer, I realize that this is it. The point of no return. There's no escape. No salvation. I am now a part of the legend. The darkness is suffocating. The light, the creature, is so close now I can feel its presence wrapping around me like a cold, unyielding coil. My breath is ragged, too quick, too shallow. Panic claws at my chest, urging me to move, to do something, anything, to break free. But I know. Deep down, I know it's pointless. There's no running. There's no escaping. This is the end. And yet, despite the certainty, I fight. I claw my way through the suffocating panic. My hands shake, my legs barely hold me up, but I push on. Each step feels like I'm wading through quicksand, every movement a struggle against an invisible force trying to drag me down. My heart beats in my throat, and the fear surges inside me like a wave. I won't let it take me like this. I won't just give in. The light is closer now, too close. I can see it clearly, a flicker of movement in the endless black, like a star that pulses in and out of existence. It's not the light of any creature I've ever seen. It's wrong. It's alive in its own twisted way. And the closer it gets, the more I feel my mind beginning to unravel. The air is colder, heavier. The trees around me seem to bend in toward me, their twisted branches reaching out like claws, trying to ensnare me, to hold me in place. I push through. I don't know how much longer I can go. Every step feels like the last. My body is screaming at me to stop, to fall to the ground and let it take me. But I can't. Not yet. The creature is behind me now. I can feel it. The chill of its presence presses against my back, a cold that sinks into my bones. Its light flickers again, closer, brighter, and suddenly I hear it, a sound that shouldn't be there, a soft, almost inaudible hum. It's like the sound of 1,000 whispers, all speaking at once, an endless tide of voices that swirl around me, choking me. I can't let it win. I can't become one of them. I can't. I stumble, my foot catching on a rock. My legs give way beneath me, and I crash to the ground. The world spins, the stars blur in my vision, and the weight of the darkness presses in harder. The cold is unbearable now, like icy fingers clutching at my spine. But even as my body screams in exhaustion, even as the fear overwhelms me, I rise. I force myself to my hands and knees. I crawl, dragging myself through the dirt, through the darkness. I'm so close to the edge. Just a little more. I push against the ground, my muscles screaming in protest. My vision blurs, my mind frays at the edges, but I keep going. I have to. I have to keep moving. The light is so close now. I can feel it seeping into my skin, into my very soul. It's not just the creature anymore, it's the forest, the world around me, all of it melding together in a twisted dance of light and shadow, life and death. But I won't stop. I won't give in. Even though I know that this is hopeless, I know it's hopeless, I can't stop fighting. Not yet. I hear a snap of a twig behind me, a movement in the darkness. The creature is coming for me. I can feel it in my bones. But then, just as I think it will be over, as I think I'm done, something inside me snaps. The primal instinct to survive surges through me, raw and desperate. I surge forward, pushing every last ounce of strength into one final burst of movement. My fingers brush against something, the cold, smooth bark of a tree. I grab onto it, my nails scraping the surface. I pull myself up, each breath ragged and labored, but I can't stop. I won't stop. For a moment, I think I've made it. I think I'm free. But then I hear it, closer now, impossibly close, the creature's presence, its hum, its light, all of it pressing down on me like a vice. It's here. It's not letting go. I can't fight anymore. But I still try. I still reach. I still struggle. And in that moment, I realize something else. No matter how much I fight, no matter how much I run, the creature is not chasing me. It's not the creature that's the threat. It's the forest. And I, in my desperation, have become part of it. The light, no, the creature, has reached me. It surrounds me now, pulsating, bright and cold, but it's not the light that terrifies me. It's not the thing that I thought was chasing me. No, it's the slow, creeping realization that I've lost the ability to separate what's real from what's not. The world around me is slipping, unraveling, and I can't hold on to anything anymore. I hear it before I see it, a hum, soft and constant, like an ancient song that has no end, echoing through my bones. The air vibrates with it, each pulse of sound a wave crashing over me, pulling me under. I try to focus on the ground, on the trees around me, anything to ground me, but the forest is no longer the forest. It is something else. It bends and twists in ways that defy logic, its shapes too fluid, too strange. The shadows are alive now, curling and stretching like tendrils, reaching toward me. They're part of the creature too, I realize. They are the creature. It's coming closer. I can't see its face, if it even has one. But I feel its presence. It's not just in front of me, it's inside my head, inside my thoughts. I try to look away, to shake my head and clear the fog in my mind, but it's too late. The creature has already invaded. It's there, in the space between my thoughts, weaving its way through the gaps in my consciousness. I'm suffocating in it. And in that moment, a sharp, bitter clarity cuts through the fog. It doesn't matter if I escape. I don't need to escape. What I fear most isn't death. It's losing myself. The ground beneath me seems to dissolve, and the world bends and stretches. The trees, the rocks, the sky, they blur into something unrecognizable, like watercolors smudged by a careless hand. My own hands tremble, not from fear of death, but from the slow horror that is creeping in, the terror that I am slipping away. My mind is no longer my own. I can't control the thoughts rushing through me, can't understand the visions that flicker like flames behind my eyes. The creature is here, but it doesn't matter. I can't fight it, can't escape it. It's in me, and I am in it. This is how it ends, I think. The realization is painful, the kind of realization that cuts so deep you don't know if it's physical or psychological. But it's true. I've fought against the creature, against the forest, against the shadows, and I've lost. But the worst part isn't the thing that chases me. It's the thing I've become. The creature reaches out, and I feel its cold touch on my skin. It's like ice, but it doesn't burn. It doesn't feel like anything. There's no pain, no final gasp of breath. There's only a silence. A perfect, endless silence, and then nothing. I am no longer here. It's not the creature that has taken me. It's my mind. It's my perception. The forest, the creature, the light, they're all part of me now. The real horror isn't in what's chasing me. It's in what I've become. And there is no escape from that. I no longer know where I am. The forest has become an endless expanse of darkness, the trees no longer upright but sagging, shifting, distorting like twisted, dying things. The path I thought I was on is gone, replaced by an abyss of shadows that swallow my every step. My body moves, but it feels like a ghost, like something not quite my own. The fear, it's still with me, stronger than ever, but now it's not just the fear of the creature. No, it's something deeper, more insidious. I can't find the ground beneath me. I can't find the certainty of my own body or thoughts. The fear has consumed me completely, leaving nothing but the gnawing emptiness. It's as if the forest has merged with my mind, twisting the space around me into something unrecognizable, something alive. The sounds of the world have been replaced by the beating of my own heart, each thud louder than the last, a painful reminder of how fragile I've become. The creature, if it even is a creature, isn't chasing me anymore. It has become me. It's in my veins, in the air I breathe, in the very fabric of my thoughts. And I realize then, with a sinking, suffocating weight, my escape is impossible. I don't even know if I'm still alive. My hands are trembling, but not from cold or fear anymore. I can't feel them at all. I can't feel anything. My mind is a maze I can't navigate, a series of dead ends where every path only leads deeper into confusion. The shadows are thick now, thick enough to choke on. They crawl up my legs, my arms, covering me in a dark, suffocating blanket. There is no air. There is no sound. There is nothing but the endless void. And then I hear it. A soft voice, so quiet I almost think I imagined it, but it's there. A whisper, so soft that it might be just the wind or my own fading thoughts. Welcome. I don't know who or what is speaking. I don't know what it means. I don't know anything anymore. But I understand the meaning of that word in the deepest, most terrifying part of my soul. I have crossed a line. I have become part of this place. part of this story. There is no escape, no return. I am nothing but a fragment of memory, a fleeting trace in the dark, slowly dissolving into the very air I breathe. This is my end. But it isn't the death I thought it would be. It's not sharp or sudden. It's not painful. It's quiet. It's peaceful, even, in a way, if peace could ever be so suffocating. I am forgotten now, lost in the forest, where time and space no longer exist. The creature, the light, the shadows, they've all become a part of me, a part of this twisted reality. And I am no longer anything at all. I am nothing but the silence. And it's final. My mind is slipping. Slowly, surely, it's unraveling, piece by piece, like thread pulled from the seams of a garment too old to hold together anymore. I don't know how it happened, when the shift began, but I can feel it now. I feel myself slipping, not just from the forest, but from myself. From everything I was. I try to focus, to anchor myself with my thoughts, but they're fragmented, like shattered glass scattering across a floor I can't reach. Each thought that tries to form slips away before I can fully grasp it. My memories, my life before all of this, become distant, like whispers in a fog. They lose their clarity, their meaning, fading into the abyss that now surrounds me. I try to scream, but my voice doesn't sound like my own. It's a hollow sound, a gurgle lost in the thick, choking air. My body moves, but I don't control it anymore. My legs are taking me forward, or maybe backward, but I don't know. I don't even know which way I'm facing. It's like I'm no longer bound by the laws of the world. My mind is drifting, and with it, my identity, who I am, and what I want. I reach out, my hands grasping for something, anything, to hold on to. But my fingers meet only cold emptiness, nothing but the thick air of the forest, or perhaps, the void I've been sucked into. I can feel it, something is pulling me. It isn't the creature, though it's all around me. It's the forest. No, not even the forest. It's the space between, the place where nothing exists but the echo of my own thoughts, bouncing off the walls of an empty mind. It's pulling me deeper. I can't stop it. I can't fight it. It's like my body has forgotten how to respond, how to resist. My muscles twitch involuntarily, my chest rises and falls, but there's no connection to any of it. It's just motion. My body is moving on its own, but I'm not in control. I am a passenger in my own skin, watching as if from far away, helpless, unable to make it stop. I close my eyes, and the blackness takes me, but it isn't a comforting darkness. It's a consuming darkness, one that doesn't just block out the light, but devours it. It's as though I'm being swallowed whole by this place, by the forest, by the light, by everything. I no longer know where I begin and where it ends. I no longer know if I ever had control to begin with. There is only the pull. Only the tugging at my soul, like a string being pulled taut, drawing me further into this place where I don't exist anymore. Where nothing exists anymore. I am losing myself. I am becoming part of something else. And I realized then, with a cold shiver, that this was never about escaping. This was about becoming. Becoming one with the forest. Becoming nothing at all. It's the end now. I know it. There's no denying it. The moment the creature's presence fully envelopes me, something within me breaks, a final snap of consciousness, like the last thread of a fraying rope. I feel its cold touch before I see it, like an invisible weight pressing against my chest, suffocating me from the inside out. It's not a creature of flesh, not something that can be fought, not something that can be escaped. It's more. Something older, something bound to this place. A force. A shadow. A consumption. I can hear it now, the faintest sound, like a whisper, a breath not my own, seeping into my mind. But this time, it doesn't feel like a warning. It feels like acceptance. Like it's asking me to let go. And I do. I have to. There's no strength left to resist. I'm no longer sure where my body ends and where the darkness begins. I can feel the pull, the consuming force drawing me in, devouring me whole, piece by piece. The world around me blurs, and I no longer know what is solid, what is air, what is life. The lines between them have all melted. I see the light again, but what I thought was my tormentor, the thing that had haunted me, that had pursued me through the woods. But now, it's not the same. It's not just light. It's alive, swirling, undulating, pulsing like the very heartbeat of the forest. It calls to me, and I can't resist. It pulls me closer, closer, until I can no longer see anything but the light, until it is all that exists. And then, I am inside it. Inside the light. Inside the darkness. Inside the forest. There's nothing left of me now. No memory. No thought. No fear. No self. I feel it, the last shudder of my soul, as I merge into the trees, as my flesh and bones become the soil, the roots, the air. I am the forest now. I am the shadow in the corner of your vision. I am the thing that calls to you when the night grows long, when the path grows uncertain. I am the thing that waits. And I will never be forgotten. There's a moment, just a fleeting instant, when I can see myself from the outside. Not my body, not my face, but something deeper. A presence. A consciousness, or what's left of it. I feel myself, like a shadow, detached but still there, floating between worlds. Between life and death. Between light and darkness. I'm no longer in my body. I've lost that anchor, the tether that kept me tied to who I was. But I can still sense the world around me. I can hear the wind rustling through leaves that are no longer mine, feel the cold earth beneath me that no longer holds any warmth. The sounds are different now, distant yet familiar, like a memory that doesn't belong to me anymore. I am no longer the one who is hunted. I am the hunter. I see the world in a way I couldn't before. Through a veil that stretches over the forest, through the thicket and trees. I watch as others pass by, as they walk the same path I once did, oblivious to the dark presence that lurks just beyond the reach of their vision. The ones who think they are safe. The ones who will never know the truth until it's too late. They are me now, and I am them. I am everywhere, in the wind, in the shadows, in the very air they breathe. My sight is no longer bound to a single point of view. I see it all at once. I am the unseen watcher, the one whose presence can never be felt until it's too late. The forest is my domain now, and I am part of it. I can feel its pulse, its rhythm, like a living, breathing thing. It moves with me. It moves through me. I am its breath, its heart. I have become the very essence of what I once feared. The thing that calls in the night. The thing that draws you deeper into the darkness until you, too, lose yourself. I realize, in the deepest part of my new existence, that there is no escape from this. I can no longer wish for release. I can no longer desire freedom. I am now a part of this place, its keeper, its watcher, its guardian. There is no end to this journey. And as I drift through the darkened woods, I wait. I wait for the next traveler, the next lost soul. For the next you who will wander too far. And I will be here, watching. I no longer have thoughts. Not the ones I once knew, the ones I clung to in desperate moments. All that remains is a vast emptiness, like the silence that fills the forest after a storm. I am nothing but a part of the earth now, a fragment of the shadows that stretch long beneath the trees. I have become the absence, the void where there is no return. The light, the one that followed me, that hunted me, is now all that exists. It burns bright against the darkness, but it is not warmth, not life. It is cold, cold like the breath of something ancient, something waiting. And with each flicker, it draws the next one in. Another lost soul, another wanderer who will never find their way out. I see them now, through eyes that no longer blink. The light calls to them, just as it called to me. I see their hesitation, their confusion, their desperation to understand what's happening, but they are powerless. They are already too far in. They follow the light because it promises something, comfort, safety, clarity, but all it delivers is the same fate. They can't hear me. They can't feel me, even as I watch them from the very place I once stood. I am now as distant from them as the forest itself. They are nothing but shadows passing through shadows, their steps lost in the rhythm of the earth that has already claimed them. The light beckons them closer, pulling them toward the depths, toward the dark heart of the forest. It knows no mercy. It does not ask, it simply takes. The sound of their footsteps, the sound of their breath, fades away as they enter the place where I now reside. And with them, the cycle begins again. Their eyes, those eyes, will one day be empty too. They will not see the light, nor will they see the dark. Their gaze will turn inward, as mine once did. And in the end, they will become part of this place, like I have. They will be swallowed by the very forest they tried to escape, their memories scattered like leaves on the wind. There is no escape from this, no salvation. There is only the endless cycle, the endless waiting, the endless watching. And the light. Always the light. Always drawing them in. Always leading them into the darkness. The forest has claimed its newest visitor, just as it always has. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, remains unchanged, indifferent to the fate that befalls those who wander too deep. The trail is quiet now, the silence almost suffocating, save for the whisper of wind rustling through the trees. Somewhere, far beyond the tree line, there are those who still speak of the disappearances, the stories told around campfires in hushed tones. But the legends are always just that, legends. No one truly believes in the darkness that resides here. Not until they are drawn into it, one step at a time. The last photograph has faded from memory, the name of the lost one fading into the list of forgotten travelers. But it's not the end. Not really. Out there, in the deepening dusk, the light flickers again. The same distant glow that once pulled the hero in, now drawing another, unknowingly. The forest, unchanged, waits. And as long as it stands, as long as its roots burrow deeper into the earth, the cycle will never end. For the light will always call. And the darkness will always answer. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of this living nightmare, there are eyes that watch, waiting for the next to fall. The cycle continues. Thank you for making our stories part of your relaxation time. We hope they brought you a sense of peace and transported you to a world of fantasy and mystery. If you enjoyed the stories, feel free to leave us a review. Your feedback inspires us and helps us make the content even better. Now, unwind to the calming sounds of rain and thunderstorms, which will continue to set a tranquil mood. Let these sounds carry you gently into the realm of dreams. Don't forget to like our page if you haven't yet. Wishing you a restful night's sleep. Relax, rest well, and good night.